Hello and welcome today to this discussion on the 8 limbs of yoga. My name's Shawna Barber and I've been giving some free info sessions locally about the 8 limbs of yoga. And what I've come to realize is that most people, even people who've been taking yoga for quite some time, don't realize that there is more to yoga than the practice in the studio or in the classroom. That may have heard some of the Yoga Sutras dripped into their classes, but they're not really sure what the Yoga Sutras are or how they apply to life, and really not understanding that yoga is a whole life system for spiritual practice. It's way beyond the hour and 15-minute practice that we experience inside a classroom. So my aim for today is to help you to understand. I'd like to change that misunderstanding of what yoga is and turn that into knowledge and hopefully inspire you to go forward and learn more about the whole practice of yoga beyond the classroom. So I also want to introduce the text that I refer to. This is called The Secret Power of Yoga by Nishala Joy Devi, and it's a wonderful heart-based interpretation of the Yoga Sutras, and we'll talk about what those are in a moment. But it's such a loving interpretation, a positive and uplifting interpretation of the Yoga Sutras, that's my go-to book. So that's the book I would recommend if you would like to buy a book after you learn more today. That's the book that I would recommend. So we'll jump right into the slideshow. Let me get that started. And here we go. So again, my name's Shawna Barber, and I'd like to welcome you today on this little journey through the 8 limbs of yoga. I'm a spiritual mentor. I'm also a breathwork facilitator and a yoga teacher. I first walked into a yoga class when I was 21 years old. I immediately felt like I'd come home to my body and to myself in a way that I'd never experienced before. And that's really been my overarching experience with yoga and with spiritual practice in general, is that it is an experience. It's not something else that somebody can tell you. And so that was my first experience, my first taste of being in my body and being in a way that really felt like home. It felt good. When I was 30 years old is when I took my yoga teacher training, which was a completely transformational moment in my life. Before that, in my mid to late 20s, I'd gone through quite a serious depression, and I had lost my yoga practice during that time. It wasn't until I picked up my yoga practice again that depression lifted. And by going through that yoga teacher training, it wasn't just the practice on the mat that changed me and who I was in that moment in my life. It was all the practices outside of the yoga classroom as well, and all the internal learnings that happened. Then when I was 35, I took a breathwork course. Now that is not pranayama as known in yoga, but it's an actual healing modality. That was a 6-month course, but that's really informed my yoga practice. That's really made me the yoga teacher that I am today. And it's really helped me to understand the value and the power of the breath and what that brings to the yoga practice. So the past 20 years of my life and of these spiritual studies for me have enhanced my life in such a way that I enjoy life so much more than what I used to. I'm not any longer, or not never, of course I'm still human, but I'm not as much caught up in these negative cycles of thoughts or these negative patterns playing out in my life over and over again. And so I'm really wanting to deepen the practice for other people as well. And so that's what I hope that I give you a glimpse into today is the ability for the yoga practice to enhance your life as it has mine. So let's get into what is yoga. Let me just move this little screen out of the way. I don't know if you're seeing it the same way I am, but it's blocking the pictures. So yoga is not what we often think of in the Western culture. It's more than that. It's more than just a set of postures and maybe a little bit of breathing. Yoga is a whole life system, and it opens us up to transformation. So that feeling that you get when you walk out of a yoga class, when you're feeling really good and you're feeling really in tune and you're feeling really in alignment and the whole world looks different to you, that's something you can extend into your whole life. And that's what the whole practice of yoga, these 8 limbs and the Yoga Sutras are there to provide. So yoga is anywhere from 3,000 to 5,000 years old approximately. The texts, the Vedas, are some of the oldest texts in the world, just as on par with the Bible and whatnot. But about 1,700 years ago, sage Patanjali came and took the Vedas, took the teachings of yoga at that time and put them into what's called the Yoga Sutras. So these sort of step-by-step, simple phrases and lines that were meant to be read by the practitioner and taken and explored internally and brought into life from you, from within. So there's no single set philosophy on yoga. And it's non-dogmatic. It's not bureaucratic like some religions can be. Yoga is more of a set of guidelines for practitioners' personal spiritual growth. So it's really a personal practice. It's really meant to be taken and go internal and be something that you bring into life for your own life and how it applies to you. And the thing that I really love about these teachings is that it really is these ancient truths, these basic wisdoms, but then we can take it and we can say, how does this apply to my life today? So here are the 8 limbs of yoga. This is a handy dandy little visual that I've made up. I'm a very visual person, so this helps me. So we start with the yamas and the niyamas. Those are the first 2 limbs of yoga. Now you'll see here that I've written that these are meant to be studied and integrated prior to the yoga practice. Okay, so these are, some people think of them as the ethics or the philosophies. Some people refer to them as the do's and the don'ts of life. That's sort of an oversimplification, I would say. Really, the yamas are about mastery. They're about going internally and going out and exploring how we're relating to our external world. So the yamas are sort of ways to help us cultivate how to relate to our external world, what's happening around us. And the niyamas are the opposite. They're what's happening within us and how we're relating to ourselves. So those 2 things, there's 5 of each. There's 5 yamas and there's 5 niyamas, and I'll go into more detail later as to what those are. But these are there for a reason as the first and the second limbs of yoga, because these are meant to get us into the right state of being before we even step onto the yoga mat, before we even go into that physical yoga practice. So I'll go into more detail about those in a moment. But then we move into the 3rd, 4th, and 5th limbs of yoga: asana, pranayama, and pratyahara. So asana is the physical practice, and it's meant to be a steady and comfortable practice. The pranayama is meant to feed the body with the life force energy, and pratyahara is all about going and drawing more and more inward. It's a bit more of a subtle phase, but these 3 parts make up the hatha yoga practice. So if you're not focusing on your breath in a yoga class, or you're not focusing within and you're just doing the postures, you're not really doing the full practice of yoga in that hour class that you're in. So I'm just going to refer to the book and just read to you those first couple limbs of yoga and how Nishala Joy Devi interprets those. Give me just a moment here. Here we go. So a yama is a reflection of our true nature. A niyama is our evolution toward harmony. And then we get into the asana, comfort in being or posture. It's not just about the posture itself and the alignment of the posture, but it's the alignment of our inner being, being comfortable in ourself. And pranayama is often thought of as working with the breath, which it is, but she's also interpreting this as the enhancement and guidance of universal prana or energy. Prana is the life force energy. So that breathing is really a way of enhancing and guiding our life force energy, not just about having a nice deep breath, which is great, but it's more than that. And then pratyahara is encouraging the senses to draw within. And so these three things together create a balanced practice. Ha is the masculine, the fire, the action. Tha is the feminine, the cooling, the softening. And these are all part of that the dualistic, nature of the practice is not just this action of doing the postures. There's also this internal reflection that we're going into and this direction of our life force energy. And it's this, I guess you could call it moving meditation is what we're really going for here. So that creates balance and harmony in the system when we're practicing those three limbs, asana, pranayama, and pratyahara together. It's creating balance and harmony. When we're not utilizing all three aspects, there can be imbalances emotionally, mentally, physically even. We can create injury in the body. And all of those first 5 limbs, they're leading up to the last 3 limbs, dharana, dhyana, and ishvara pranadhana. I can never get that one off my mouth. And how Nishila Joy Devi interprets those, dharana is the gathering and focusing of consciousness inward. Dhyana is the conscious inward flow, continuous inward flow of consciousness. And samadhi is union with divine consciousness. So you might wonder, well, what's the difference between dharana and dhyana? Dharana is more concentration. Dhyana is more meditation. And a really great explanation I heard was, if you think about the atmosphere and the clouds that form droplets of rain, that's that concentration. And those moments of concentration, those moments of stillness and silence that happen when we are focused on something completely, whether it be the breath or a mantra or whatever it is that we're using as our point of focus, those concentrated droplets of rain, if you want to think of them that way, then drip, drip, drip into a continuous flow, which is dhyana, which is that flow of inward consciousness, the meditative state, which then therefore brings us into the wider, if you think of a river that moves into the ocean, we're then moving into the vast, wider sense of divine consciousness, and we're becoming in union with that ocean of consciousness. Our river, our own individual flow of consciousness moves into that greater, wider consciousness. So those are the 8 limbs of yoga. And this whole system enhances our life in a way that brings us, again, into balance and harmony. And so we'll move on. Now we'll focus on the yamas and the niyamas. Now the yamas, again, those are that relationship to the external world. Ahimsa, Nishila Joy Devi interprets as reverence, love, and compassion for all. Often, though, this is referred to as non-violence. So again, this is why I really enjoy her interpretations, because rather than focusing on non-violence and thinking about violence and what we shouldn't do, Nishila Joy Devi is bringing us into this heart space of reverence, love, and compassion for all. What we're actually wanting to cultivate here is that reverence, love, and compassion for all. And then moving on into Satya, truthfulness and integrity. Asteya is generosity and honesty, which again is often translated as non-stealing. So we're focusing on what we don't want to be doing again, rather than this generosity and honesty. And we have to put into context that oftentimes these sutras were translated by people back in a time when the world was a little bit more puritanical and a little bit more of that, don't do this, and focus. So this is why I really enjoy her interpretation. Brahmacharya, balance and moderation of the vital life force energy, which is often interpreted as non-excess or even celibacy. So again, there's this sort of feeling of harshness to that, I think, rather than the cultivation of certain practices. And aparigraha, awareness of abundance and fulfillment, which is often referred to as non-greed or non-possessiveness. Now, the other thing that I really enjoy teaching people is to be able to come in together and to study together these concepts and realize that we're applying them not only to modern day life, but to ourselves personally. And that this practice, this spiritual cultivation, is a very personal one. So while some people often translate ahimsa as nonviolence and reverence and love, compassion for all, for them that means vegetarianism, right? And sometimes we can get very almost harsh about those belief systems. Reverence and love for all means, not killing another animal for our food. And it can almost become, in my eyes, fundamentalist, similar to religion sometimes, which is what personally puts me away or puts me off from a religious practice, because there is often such a fundamentalist nature. So I would ask the person who is so vehement about being a vegetarian or vegan, are you then also interpreting brahmacharya in a very literal sense as celibacy? And are you then practicing celibacy? And so we start to take a step back and look at the wider lens of not just the individual sutras, but how they all work together in this whole life system. And if we are really practicing ahimsa, then we're also going to be in reverence and love, compassion for all, including our fellow humans who are on the path, and we're accepting and loving and having compassion and reverence for each person where they are and how they are applying these practices to their life. So I guess my point in just stopping here and saying that is that I feel it's really important to study these practices in a group so that we can begin to actually apply them and cultivate them within a group, a small group setting, which then applies to our greater life setting, right? And then we can also apply them to the yoga practice, which is what that's another thing they're meant to do, is prepare us to get on the mat. How am I in ahimsa when I'm on the mat? How am I being in reverence and love and compassion for myself? Or how am I being in truthfulness and integrity in this posture? Am I reaching beyond my limits just to get into what I think the pose should look like? Or am I being truthful with my body's abilities and limitations? And am I staying in integrity, in alignment in this posture, so that I can be in reverence and love for myself and be at ease in the posture and balance my vital life force energy and whatnot. So we can start to see how these things all work together on the mat and off the mat. So then we move into the niyamas. Saucha is simplicity, purity, refinement. Santosha is contentment, peace with oneself and others. Tapas is igniting the purifying flame, often referred to as the discipline and austerity. Swadhyaya is sacred study of the divine through scripture, nature, and introspection. And Ishwara Pranandana, wholehearted dedication to the divine. So again, if you stop here, if you pause here and you read these and you think about these yamas and niyamas, you begin to see how much they would build and inform that yoga practice on the mat, and how they apply to our daily lives and help us to bring that yoga practice on the mat out into our world. And not only how we're relating to the external world around us and the circumstances around us, but also internally to ourselves. So why is it that I'm so passionate about teaching people this information? One of the reasons is that I am a lifelong learner. You might have heard throughout this presentation that I have always loved studying this material, that I feel like it's a very personal exploration. That's a very strong belief of mine that, I grew up spiritual but not religious. The messages of religion, a lot of those basic truths really resonated with me, but there were things that I felt that were incongruent. There were things about the divine consciousness, for example, that God is all loving and forgiving and yet wrathful and vengeful. Those things didn't add up to me. These very strict fundamentalist views of the world, that there's black and there's white, and that's all there is, and that this is the one way that we should be living, and that it comes from the church telling me how to live my life. That just never really resonated with me. So I really appreciate this lifelong learning, this spiritual cultivation that's so very personal. And I just desire to pass that on to other people, but also to create a community of people who are committed to that lifelong learning. Are there any other workshop and course junkies that are joining this information, this webinar? I would be doing constant courses and workshops if I could. And I really value having a place to go that people can come together in the vibration of love, this unconditional love, acceptance, and inclusion. So it's not about being right and wrong. It's not about being part of a special club or of people that believe this certain thing in a certain way. It's this more open-hearted, accepting and inclusive of all variances, all colors of the rainbow, if you want to think of it that way. And then the other thing is that I need discipline and structure, and that this practice of the 8 limbs of yoga really provides that. It's providing a structure and a very logical way of going through these 8 limbs and through these sutras, or going through the 8 limbs to incorporate the whole practice, or the sutras, which are more than just the 8 limbs. I guess you could say it's taking the 8 limbs and bringing them into your practice. So if you are local to me, I'm going to go ahead and just give you a rundown for what I'm offering here in Aldinga this year in 2019. If you're not local to me, I will be putting some things online in the future. So you might want to sign up to my newsletter through my Facebook page, or send me a message and I can add you. You can send me a message through my website. So I'll go on to talk about what these offerings are in 2019. So what I've created is something called the 8 Limbs Journey. And in the 8 Limbs Journey, it's comprised of 2 parts, the Sunday Sadhana and then the Yamas and Niyamas course. The Sunday Sadhana is weekly, the Yamas and Niyamas are monthly. I'm just going to skip to the side of this slide that talks about the Yamas and Niyamas first. So the practice of yoga, as we've talked about, is made up of these 8 limbs, and it's a whole life system of spiritual study that's going to set you up to be feeling more freedom, to having more meaning and purpose in your life. And those first 2 limbs, the Yamas and Niyamas, those philosophical teachings are the ones that we're going to be studying 1 per month. So as I said, there's 5 Yamas, there's 5 Niyamas, and so from February through November, we'll take one per month, either a Yama or a Niyama, and we'll dive deep into it each month, so that by the end of the year, you'll have a whole new set of spiritual skills that are going to guide you through your life with more ease. Now, the Sunday Sadhana, that's a weekly practice. Sadhana is a routine spiritual practice. So I've created this weekly community sadhana to encourage a spiritual practice. And I've included all 8 limbs of yoga through contemplation, chanting, breath practices, posture, meditation, and prayer. So you will experience some of that Sunday sadhana will be similar to what you've done in other classes, but I'm bringing in more of that contemplation through looking at the yamas and niyamas, or the sutras that complement the yamas and niyamas. I'll be bringing that in. So for example, if we are studying ahimsa in one particular month, in the Sunday sadhana for that entire month, each week, we will be talking about a seed concept in ahimsa. We'll be talking about how that applies to life very briefly in the beginning to sort of set the stage for the entire practice. And then the chants that are chosen, the postures and the practice will all center around ahimsa and this reverence and love and compassion for all and for ourselves, how it relates in that practice, but then also outside. So the two really, the yamas and niyamas course and the Sunday sadhana really complement each other. And again, when we meditate and when we pray, it'll all be around this concept of ahimsa or whatever it is that we're studying for that particular month. So the sadhana is really meant to be complementary to the yamas and the niyamas course, although it can be practiced on its own. So you can just come to the sadhana each week if that's the commitment that you want to make to yourself and to learn these practices. It's really, I've created this so that you can decide how deep you want to go. You might live a bit further away from Aldinga and just want to come down the once a month for the yamas and niyamas course. Or you might just want to do the Sunday sadhana on its own. If you really want to dive deep and integrate these two things into your life, or integrate these practices into your life, then you can take the yamas and the niyamas every month and the Sunday sadhana every week. And that's just really going to solidify all those 8 limbs and those practices into your life. So just another little breakdown of each, the yamas and niyamas and Sunday sadhana. So the Sunday sadhana is weekly from 8:30 to 9:30 every Sunday, beginning January 27th. It's casual at this point with a $15 introductory offer, and there is limited space. So Florio Yoga can hold about up to 15, 17 people. And so there's limited space and it is filling up. So I've been giving a couple of free sessions leading up to the launch of it, and people are loving it. People are already booking into August 27th. So I definitely recommend, if you're interested in trying, book in. And if you'd like to try a free session, definitely send me a message and I'll organize that for you. So again, this is all done at Florio Yoga in Aldinga. Beautiful space, beautiful energy there. And then the yamas and niyamas, I'm offering that monthly. So it's 2 hours. It's going to be, I mean, obviously I'll be leading the discussion. I'll be bringing in these concepts, but then we'll be using that book, Secret Power of Yoga, very short little readings that you might want to do before the session so that you can come in ready to discuss and with an idea for it in your mind already. The second Sunday of the month or first Thursday of the month is when the yamas and niyamas will be held from 10 to 12, 10 a.m. to 12 p.m. And that'll be February through November. $45 a month for the membership. So that includes a Facebook group, all optional. So the readings are optional. The Facebook group is optional, but again, very recommended so that you can really integrate this into your life. The bookings are required for the whole 10 months. I may, depending on how things are feeling, may open it up to casual attendance, but that would be at a higher price. And of course, then you wouldn't be getting the full 10 practices into your life. Also, if you are going to be away for one of those months, you can always slot into the other session if you're available for that. And if not, I'll be recording the session so I can put it into a Dropbox for people in case they need to miss a session for any reason. And again, this is all done at Florio Yoga. So I love that space, and I'm sure you will too if you haven't been there. I'm very excited about these offerings. I'm very excited about bringing this to people and helping and supporting people to really integrate these practices into the day-to-day. And so you're invited to join me. Absolutely. Here is how you can join. These are the links. This is the link to my booking site. And you can find my booking either through my Facebook page, Sacred Center with Shawna Barber, or on my website, www.sacredcenter.com.au. There are links within both of those places for the booking site. And what you do is you click on that booking site and you scroll down for the Sunday sadhana, you find that one, you select your date, and you simply just pay there, and that's just a week-by-week casual at this point. And then the yamas and niyamas, there's one extra step in it, so I just want to explain that. You want to go to the booking site, scroll right down to the bottom. There's a subscription section. That's where you'll set up your monthly payment, and you'll receive a code. Then you go back to the booking page, and you select either the Sunday or the Thursday session, whichever it is that you're wanting to join in on, and you apply that code. You plug in your code for all 10 sessions. It'll populate for that, and you'll be booked in and registered for the course. So I really appreciate your time. I really appreciate that your curiosity in learning today. So I really thank you for joining me. And I hope that you've learned something new. And I really hope that this has inspired you to learn more, to broaden your understanding of the yoga practices. And I hope it's sort of giving you a taste for that extra freedom you can have in your life, that extra enjoyment that you might be able to cultivate in your life, that balance and harmony. I hope that this has inspired you to go toward and go forward toward those things. I send you off with so many blessings, so much love. Again, I'm Shawna Barber. You take good care. Namaste. Thank you.